Well, hello there, folks. It's Tuesday. No, yeah, Tuesday evening. I forget the date, the 27th or the 28th. I don't remember. I don't pay much attention anymore. Anyway, I got a little feedback for you on vendors for your information, the FYI type of thing. I'm dealing with quite a few vendors on this project, and obviously you run into some good ones and you run into some that I won't say are bad ones, but not so easy to deal with, not so good to deal with. This is about three of them. First one is the vendor I used for the disc brakes, and that was ECI, Engineered Components Incorporated. I come to find out after I've dealt with them for a long time on a number of projects, three projects now, I think. And it's been a while. So what I learned is that since the last time I dealt with them, the ownership of the company has changed. The guy that owns it now, his name, I don't know his last name, but his name is Mark. And it just coincidentally, that's who I hooked up with when I called to talk about and in the end ordered this disc brake kit. Mark owns this company now. He did not own this company when this kit was engineered by the previous owner. And this kit is designed to work with Heinz 2-inch drop spindles. So the Engineered Components does not supply the spindle. They supply everything outside of the spindle. All right. So I bought the kit. Like I said, I like dealing with this company. I was what's the word? Positive, agreeable, whatever, with the details they told me with the materials they were going to send, the rotors, the calipers, the sizes, all that good stuff. All right, so when I got the stuff here, I was a little surprised that there was no instruction sheet included. And I learned after I started messing with it that the reason there was no instruction sheet included is that you could put this thing together any way you wanted. The caliper brackets could go on the front of the spindles or on the back of the spindles. They were left or right, didn't matter. The bearings obviously could only go one way. So really, I guess they felt it wasn't that necessary to provide a instruction sheet, and I would have to agree with them. The one problem that I ran across was that when I assembled this originally, I put the rotors on the back like you see them now. In other words, on the back side, the caliper, excuse me, not the rotor. I put the caliper on the back side of the rotor like you see it now. And I went to assemble it and I put the top bolt in. And then when I went to put the bottom bolt in, the bottom bolt ran right into the steering arm to the point where you couldn't put the bolt in the bracket. The only way you could install the bolt in the bracket would be to put the caliper on the bracket and then put the bracket and the caliper on the spindle, which is okay, but kind of awkward. Every time you change pads, you would have to remove the bracket and the caliper. If you put the brackets on the front and mounted everything on the front side of the spindle, it all worked. But then it looked like the caliper was going to hit the sway bar. So we compressed the suspension like you see it now with the rods, and we attached the sway bar, and it turned out it cleared. But at any rate, what I did with all of that, once I learned all of that, is I corresponded back with Mark at ECI, and I was very pleased that he was very receptive to my comments and my concerns and my suggestions. Because my suggestion was to simply rotate the bracket, clock the bracket a bit. They were like, the bracket was at like 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock if you mounted it on the front or the back. And my suggestion to him was like, okay, well, clock the bracket up a little higher so it's like 10 o'clock or 9:30 even. All you need to gain is like a half inch for that bolt to clear the steering arm. And I was very pleased to find that he came back, called me, talked to me, and he said that he had looked at his fixtures and he had looked at his different devices that he had to work with, and he was working on doing that. And we talked, and I told him how much, because I used mine as an example. I told him how much it needed to go up to clear. He was going to try and do it a bigger amount than that, and it wasn't necessary. It was going to cause problems. So when he learned that it only needed a half inch, he worked with that. He raised the installation, the level. He clocked that caliper up about an inch higher than it used to be, and now it works beautifully. And he sent me a set of the updated brackets. No charge shipping, no charge for the brackets. So like I say, very, very pleased with the attitude of this vendor and the cooperation of this vendor. Like I said, he didn't come back with, a bunch of defense and a bunch of insults, or, what I mean, it's yours now, you bought it, any of that kind of. He was very positive the whole time. So I very highly recommend dealing with engineered components. Very good experience. The other one I had a good experience with, I'm having a good experience right now, is Eastwood. I bought some paint to use on the chassis. Their Eastwood Extreme, what is it called? Extreme Chassis Black. And I bought their self-etching primer, and I started doing this painting underneath the car last week, only to find out after I had already put self-etching primer, come to find out that you're not supposed to use the chassis black over the top of the self-etching primer. And when you go to their website, they have absolutely no suggestions of anything to use in between those two products. The reason they say not to do that is the paint doesn't stick very well to the self-etching primer. Doing some research online, I found that that's a common concept amongst the painting industry or whatever. Do not put top coats directly over self-etching primer, I guess, unless they're a urethane acrylic. It has something to do with the acidic base of the self-etching primer, I'm told. I understand. So at any rate, that being said, I figured out an alternative that I could use. I already had 3 cans of their Extreme Chassis Black, and I'm going to use that with another primer that's compatible, like I used it on the differential. I did the self-etching primer first because it was all bare metal, and then I went over it with a urethane-based primer surfacer, and then the chassis black. So what I'm doing is using their chassis black on parts that are bolted on, like parts that I'm not going to powder coat, like the hood hinges, because I'm afraid if I powder coat those, the pivots won't work right and all that good stuff. Some of the bolt-on stuff, I'll do the gas tank, I've done the differential, that kind of thing. And most of the chassis, I'm going to use that trim paint that I mentioned in my last video. Well, anyway, long story here. What I'm getting to here is when I started using their chassis black last week to do the differential and the springs here, I used 1 can and it worked perfect. The stuff works really nice. I started using the other can, and the can was defective. It was flooding the top of the can with paint. Every time you'd push the nozzle to spray, it would flood paint out the top of the can, all over the top of the can, and drip and everything else. I sent customer service a message. It took a few days, but I got a message back today. And they said what they're going to do without me even asking. I just wanted them to replace the faulty can. And what they're doing instead is replacing all 3 cans, because I had said I bought 3 cans and I had them and I was using them, and one of them was faulty. They came back today and they said they're going to send me 3 new cans. Well, you can't hardly beat that. I mean, that's not what I expected, but that's excellent response from a customer service department. And lastly, the one vendor that is a negative for me, again, this is my experience, is CPP. You see, I bought this, when we started this project, we bought a whole bunch of stuff from CPP. All this new suspension parts, you see, the sway bar and the new control arms, the springs, the idler arm bearing kit, the tie rod ends, and we bought one of these power steering boxes and the pump, the whole kit. I don't remember what we spent. We spent, I think, somewhere around $2,000 on parts with those guys way up front. And that was almost a year ago now. I think it is a year ago now. So we mounted the steering box. And like I say, we put the brakes on. We started turning the wheels. And all of a sudden, one day, the thing would only turn to one side. It would go from the center to one direction. I don't remember if it was right or left, but it would go from the center to one side. And when you tried to go to the other direction, it wouldn't go. It would stop in the middle. So I approached CPP, and they wanted me to make sure that I didn't have the thing just clocked wrong or something. And they were satisfied that was the case. They asked me to send them a video. So I put the box on a bench, and I did a video where you could see without any question that the shaft was turning half as much as it was supposed to and hitting something solid. It wasn't just getting tight. It was going clunk in the middle. There was definitely something wrong inside of it. So they gave me a return authorization to send the unit back. I needed to get it replaced. It was defective. It had never been used, just like this one. Never had hoses or fluid or anything in it. And they had no problem with returning it, but they sent me a label. No, they sent me an authorization, not a label. So the authorization meant that I could return the part. They would accept it. They were not paying the shipping of the defective part back to them. And I wasn't too happy about that, but so be it. So, I talked to the guy, and he recommended I do the video. I did all of that. He sent me the new device. That I paid for the new device because they obviously didn't want to send me another one without paying for it. The idea was when they got the original one back, they would refund my money. So I got the new one. And I used the packaging from the new one, put the old one in it, sent it back to them, paid the shipping. And when they got it back, I didn't hear a word for like a week and a half. So I sent a message to the customer service guy, and he said, well, they were testing it. They had sent it somewhere because it was tight, but they didn't know if it was bad or not. So they were sending it somewhere to get tested. And it's like, wait a minute, you had me do the video. I showed you conclusively in the video that it was no good. What's with this testing BS? And they came back to me, and he agreed, and he goes, well, my supervisor is at a show somewhere, and I can't get an authorization to do a refund while he's gone. Wait a minute. I answered back, wasn't too pleased about that. CPP is not this two-man operation. Well, the guy's at a show, and he's not returning my calls, was the response I got. And the owner's at another show, and the VP's with him. It's like, wait a minute, give me a break. When I buy the stuff, you mean you're not making any sales? You're making sales. You're just not doing refunds while these guys are gone. So in the end, after a month, I think, they finally cut a refund. And even that, once it was approved, it took them 2 more weeks to actually do it. Must have been more than a month. Because I kept checking my credit card statement, and it was never showing up. And I'm asking the guy, well, the girls are behind on that stuff, and So anyway, here's another my experience with that vendor. So treat that as you will, but the CPP, and that's the experience I had with them. I've talked to a number of other people also that have had negative. I won't say the same because I won't go there. That's not accurate. They've had negative experiences with CPP. So. Be aware, treat it however you want, but be aware. So anyway, that's my feedback on a couple of vendors. So 3 vendors for what it's worth. Thank you. Thanks for watching as always. Bye.